Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Historical Gamer, and once again, I'm playing Commander the Great War, and we're into November of 1916 here as we progress through the campaign. Just ending our turn, so we're about to go into the second week of November. I guess technically the third week. We're getting into late 1916, so a little bit no, actually, pretty much exactly halfway through the war, assuming we fight to 1918, as was the case, and more than halfway through the number of turns we have to play here. You can see we pulled back in one case on the Western Front. Meanwhile, the Italian front is going pretty well with a strong offensive that's been launched, driving pretty deep into the heartland of Italy. Meanwhile, on the Russian front, things have stagnated a bit for the Ottomans. Things have also slowed down for the Germans as they've kind of run into a new line of resistance with the Russian troops. The Austrians, likewise, have kind of maintained their position for the last several months. And even here, it looks like the Russians are going on the counteroffensive here, perhaps attempting to, drive us back and regain the initiative and drive on Berlin. But you can see most of these attacks look like they've gone generally in our favor, as the Germans, that is. And so that's where we're at right now. Now, November of 1916 was an interesting period. It was a period of transition for the Allies historically. Joffre, who had been in command of the French forces for quite some time, had planned a grand offensive with all of the Allies. The Western Allies in France were going to launch a combined offensive with the British and the French. The Italians were going to launch an offensive in Italy. And there was going to be an offensive launched in Palestine. I don't think there was anything about an offensive that was going to be launched with the Russians. Their army was in too bad a shape after some of the late 1916 offensives. But in general, it was going to be a coordinated offensive along all fronts with all the Allies involved, and was going to be the first of its kind in the war. They had planned something like it, as one of my viewers mentioned, in 1916, but the German Verdun offensive had more or less thrown that timetable off. Now, right now, but then also in 1916, the situation was generally favoring the Western Allies, with the exception of the fall of Romania. Things had generally gone in their favor, even with disasters like the Somme. The Germans lost so many men; it was hardly anything but a disaster for the Germans. Despite holding the line, they did so at great cost. And as I had mentioned, perhaps would have been more well suited to withdrawing. Although, interestingly enough, when we get into 1917, historically, and I believe it was Ludendorff had kind of taken over the reins on the Western Front by that point, the Germans did start a defense in depth, withdrawing from their positions that they had occupied several miles further east to a new defensive line called the Hindenburg Line. But that would take place in early 1917, and we're not quite there yet. So you can see here I'm surrounding the Romanian capital of Bucharest, but I definitely don't have the strength to take it. Hopefully we can defeat Romania here in 1916. It would definitely be nice to be able to accomplish that, although I'm not terribly optimistic. I will say, while the game does a great job of modeling the extremely sluggish nature and kind of the reasons for slow advances on the Western Front, it doesn't seem to do as admirable a job in the Eastern Front's more mobile nature. It certainly has been more mobile, but maybe not feeling as mobile as it should. Certainly not in the case of the Romanian front, where I was actually looking through Amazon the other day for some books. I have some gift cards on there to use, and I had noticed there were a couple of books on the Romanian offensive, and one of the books, I'm not sure how accurate this is or not. I don't know much about the German offensive in Romania in 1916. But one of the books went so far as to claim that the German attacks in Romania, unlike all of the rest of the World War, were a prelude to blitzkrieg with grand sweeping pincer movements and combined arms. And I'd be interested to read that to see how, I don't know, accurate is the right word, but how believable that kind of a claim is. But I haven't read it yet, so it's merely an observation that I made here. And just kind of generally reinforcing our troops here in the Sinai. The Ottomans really don't have the strength to reinforce a whole bunch of their troops. You can see there's two Russian armies near Krakow, But all of our Romanian armies are at much less than full strength. Fortunately now, at least we can bring our artillery to bear, and maybe, just maybe, we can try and maneuver around the Russian armies to try and cut them off and destroy them in detail. But we'll see. I might... Yeah, I don't have any troops to pull. I could pull these guys. But that would leave Zaristan pretty wide open to attack. I don't have any other troops that can really be used. I can shift one unit into the Balkans, I suppose, to help defeat Romania. I'd rather put him to Italy, but the railways won't get him there fast enough. So maybe to Belgrade? Okay. So we're moving some Romanian troops into Belgrade, or some Ottoman troops into Belgrade. They'll eventually go to the Italian front over here, where you can see we are likewise pretty darn worn down in terms of our manpower. We've had quite a bit of success. We're not that far from Rome, and I get the feeling that there aren't too many Italian cities between us and Rome. At the same time, we definitely lack the manpower to exploit that. I'm desperately trying to have some success in the Italian front, though, because I feel if I can get some success there, then maybe I can open up a second front against France and weaken somewhat this very strong Franco-British army, which is pushing us very hard back on our own lines. And perhaps I should take Ludendorff's strategy to heart and try and fall back and prosecute a war with defense in depth. My best chance would probably be to pull back close to the German border and defend a relatively straight line south to north toward the Dutch border. There's an area there where the map shrinks a bit. But we'll see here, reinforcing some troops surrounding Bucharest, hopefully with the ability to reduce that city within the next turn or two. The Romanians do have another capital, but if we can take Bucharest, that's going to give us, 5-6 units firmly on the flank of the Romanian army that we can hopefully sweep around and get in their rear, start taking their cities, and, has the potential, if we can get behind the Romanian army, it really has the potential to unravel a whole eastern front that the Russians have been able to patch together here. But that's probably getting a little bit too far ahead of ourselves to make that claim at this time. Meanwhile, I think on the Eastern Front, I'll launch a few offensives here. As you can see, I just did just some kind of targeted offensives to reduce enemy units and keep them on their toes, but not anything too dramatic or game-changing. I just don't have the manpower reserves, the industry, or anything like that to try and overrun every unit at once. But we can pick our points, destroy one unit here, destroy one unit there, kind of wear down the enemy piece by piece, or at least that's the hope anyway. So you can see here, I doubt the Russians have too much in the way of reserves. If I just had like 3 or 4 more army units, I could just exploit that gap there between the Russian armies, maybe get in the rear and take Przemysl, then swing in around the Romanian flank once Belgrade falls. But as it is, I can't. So just some wishful thinking, kind of Hitler in the bunker, like when he was in the bunker near the fall of Berlin at the end of World War II, making grand sweeping plans of counteroffensives that would save the day with armies and troops that didn't exist. All right, so we'll end this turn here, and we'll head into late November, maybe early. Is that going to be early December? Late November, early December, somewhere in that time frame. You can see the Allies have moved some warships into near Smyrna along the Turkish coast. It's a little bit unsettling here. One thing that I'm very vulnerable to right now with my lack of spare manpower and reserves is a Allied landing in our rear. If the Allies landed troops at like Beirut, for example, they would seriously endanger our entire defensive line and probably force us into a rapid withdrawal that would cost us quite a few men. So hoping against hope that ends up happening, but we'll see here as we shift to the East Front to see what the Russians intend to do against us. Again, launching some counterattacks against us, surprisingly enough. No apparent aim or objective, just kind of generalized counterattacks there. They're falling back on Warsaw, so gaining a little bit of ground as they're maybe consolidating their line there. And you can see the Portuguese, not Poland, if you watched my previous video when I mistakenly called Portugal Poland, the Polish, I did it again. The Portuguese have deployed a full field army to Italy, which is Good in the sense that it's diverting troops away from France, which is in some serious trouble, and very, very bad, as you can see there, them launching some successful counterattacks against us. Meanwhile, still doing so on the Western Front. The only reason I'm really not pulling troops off the Western Front and shortening my line at this point is my fear is if I do that, that will allow the Allies to easily shift troops into Italy and stabilize the situation there. So I'd basically be trading a temporary moment of some security and stability in exchange for giving up the only place that I have any kind of advantage or hope at the moment of taking an enemy capital. So that's kind of my thought process, although both steps may be futile and I may be in trouble. As you can see there, we are in early December. Now, I forgot the turns are 2-week turns, not 1-week turns. Kind of got me confused there. But yep, we're into late 1916, December of 1916 here now. As we're chugging along, our front line is very weak. We still have a little bit of an advantage, I feel, kind of in the southern half of Italy. We might be able to seal these new Allied forces off into northern Italy, maybe with a small force attack into the heart of Italy, maybe taking the capital and depriving them of their manpower, their resources, and all of that. But that's probably overly ambitious. As you can see here, my troops are badly worn down on the Italian front, and with these fighter units here, I don't think I'll be able to overrun them anytime soon. So, yeah, things not looking up as optimistic as things were just 1 or 2 videos ago. Things have certainly gone the other direction as of late here in my Commander the Great War series. You can see we did just successfully do quite a bit of damage there to that Italian garrison unit at the very least. So that's nice. Again, every unit we can destroy, even though it doesn't do much to their offensive warfighting capabilities, it does remove a unit that is currently defending the line. And I have to think if they've got a garrison unit there along the front, they don't have much in the way of manpower guarding Rome. At least that is my prayer. That's a hope and a prayer that I have at this point in time. Please, I hope it's accurate. Now, as I had mentioned, around November of 1916, General Joffre was planning a offensive which Western allies had quite a bit of confidence in. They thought there was a pretty good chance that a combined offensive along the entire front, from the Belgian coast all the way through Italy and into the Middle East as well, would have had some measure of success. A grand offensive. Millions and millions of men and shells and artillery and all of that all included, basically just overwhelming the Germans, being everywhere. When the Germans, they'd have to pick their spot. They might stop in 1 or 2 places, but the Germans would simply be overwhelmed. And not just the Germans, but, all of the Allies. Now, that did not end up coming to pass, obviously, if you've studied the First World War. What ended up happening was Joffre's designs were not all that popular with the new British government under David Lloyd George, who wanted to continue kind of nipping at the flanks and the side of the Central Powers. He wanted to expand the operations in Palestine and areas where it seemed like the Germans might be weak, and kind of avoid the areas where they'd be strong, try and limit the damage, limit the casualties through essentially attacking where the Germans were weak. Sound strategy, but maybe, if you assume that Joffre's strategy had any hope, maybe in the long run cost lives. In the interest of saving lives in the short run, you may cost lives in the long run. It's hard to say. But as it was, he lost that popularity, or not popularity, but he lost that political battle with the British leadership and the French leadership as well, who was not so interested in sort of his vision. He was losing a political battle at home, and what ended up happening was he was replaced by General Nivelles, who was the French commander at the Battle of Verdun. And Nivelle had a very different approach. He wanted to go in big, just mainly, well, not really mainly for the French, but Nivelle had a plan to launch diversionary British attacks. So not a full frontal offensive, not an offensive designed to overwhelm the Germans, but an offensive mainly meant just to pin German troops in place. A British and French diversionary attack in northern France in Flanders, and then a major French attack kind of south toward the center of the line, at Chem des Dames, something like that. Which would, in his eyes, the French would launch a short but fierce artillery bombardment that would catch the Germans by surprise, and then before the Germans had time to react or bring in reinforcements or anything like that, the French would be over the top in massive waves of infantry, just huge numbers of men deployed on a small front, punching a hole in the German lines, and then using a massive grouping of cavalry to overwhelm the Germans, break through, and initiate mobile warfare once again. Now, the idea of launching a limited, a very strong and huge offensive, but on a limited scope and a limited manpower region, perhaps not the wisest. We'll talk about Chem des Dames a little bit later, but you already know what happened if you're familiar with World War I, or if you've watched my my Let's Play or review or whatever for what was the game called again? Valiant Hearts, which is a great 2D side-scrolling game in which you play a character who ends up fighting at the Battle of Chem des Dames. But essentially the idea of trying to force a ton of men through a small corridor and rapidly breaking through the lines isn't that dissimilar to another Allied disaster in World War II at the Battle of Market Garden. I think it's interesting when you look at World War II, people often think that World War II was a validation of this idea of punching tiny holes through the enemy lines, swinging through, surrounding the enemy, and destroying them with very focused and very concentrated attacks. And while there certainly are elements of truth to the nature of launching concentrated attacks and the success that they can have, if you really study World War II, especially on the Western or Eastern fronts, they were wars where it was a massive offensive along the entire front line. It was not an offensive that was in one specific area with a massive number of men. There were constant movement, constant attacks along the entire front, all the way from the north all the way to the south. And while there were individual armored spearheads, there wasn't any one place that the Germans could concentrate their forces against and achieve a local stalemate, which would then endanger the entire front. Because sure, you could attain a local stalemate, but the problem was there were 4 or 5 other attacks going on, and even the German invasion of France and the Poland and Norway, they were all the same way. These were not specific tiny areas where the Germans were throwing all of their forces in. The Germans attacked into Belgium with a pretty considerable force, mainly as a diversion, but it was still something the Allies had to react to. They attacked through the Ardennes with another significant force, the main thrust of their offensive, and they also attacked a little bit further south. So they had 3 attacks all coming in, and while, yes, one of them was their main offensive that they were giving most of their effort to, if the Allies had ignored the other 2, they would have been in bad shape as well. And you see the same thing once the Allies break out of Normandy in the West Front. Especially you see it in the Eastern Front, where the Germans and Russians were fighting one of the most intense, bloody, and racially charged campaigns in military history in the East there. So basically, World War II is full of lessons on why things are not like Chem des Dames was planned to be, where you have this one tiny spot on the battlefield that you're going to intend to break through and just rush through and succeed. Well, when you let the enemy concentrate all his force against you, you might outnumber him along the whole front, but if you're not attacking him anywhere else, he can pull troops, weaken the line there, and unless you attack there, well, then your limited offensive in terms of its geographic area is in some serious trouble. And that was certainly the case at the Battle of Market Garden in World War II. And I guess I said I wasn't going to talk about Chem des Dames, but at least in this kind of broad overview sense, that was the case there as well. But yeah, here you see the Allies still launching counterattacks. West Front still in trouble. Italian Front is starting to bog down. And that's kind of where we are right now. You can see here we're still, the Ottomans and Austrians are still making some inventions. I don't have the manpower that I want. did bring in some Ottoman reinforcements. They're kind of coming through, but again, they're under strength as well from quite a bit of fighting also. So what's the next step, I guess? Maybe these armored cars here in the south. We can destroy the armored car unit. There will be no French forces, no Allied forces that we can see in our way. There you can see we took Florence. So Florence, Italy has fallen. And, yeah. But these armored cars are putting up a fight. The thing is, armored cars should be relatively easy to defeat because they don't get entrenchment bonuses, but... Move in some Austrian reinforcements here. And some darn successful attacks there against a French garrison unit there, taking out 60% of its men without losing a single unit. That was a great result for us there. Swing these Austrians here. So now we've got a pretty sizable force moving hopefully south toward Rome. I guess we'll see. And swing these guys over to the coast. Doesn't really cut them off from anything because they can trace their supply back to France. But as you can see there, we've cut a corridor across the Italian peninsula now. That should at least limit Italian reinforcements from being able to join the force in the northwest. More likely, I guess our best hope is that we can drive south on Rome and maybe take the Italian capital and then drive down the peninsula and take the peninsula, and at that point free up some troops for use elsewhere while keeping a second front more or less open against the Western Allies. Here in the east, I don't know if I want to launch any attacks yet, just quite yet on Bucharest. Looks like the Russians have pulled back a little bit here on the Eastern Front. They pulled back a little bit to Warsaw. They also, looks like they pulled 2 units back on the Austrian front. Okay. And left one of their units open to being cut off. Yeah, they pulled back really only 1 hex. I'm not sure why they did that, but they left this garrison unit susceptible to being surrounded, which we have surrounded it. Russian army may be starting to come apart at the seams from poor morale. They've been dealt quite a few defeats as of recently, and they've lost a couple of key cities, so I have to imagine that their national will has taken a serious drop. Maybe not into the danger zone, but certainly a drop from where it was. As we continue the kind of general advance there in the southern half of the Eastern Front, maybe we can surround this Russian unit also. Doesn't seem like they've got much in the way of support for this guy either. What I decide to do with my money is always difficult. I've never really had enough free cash flow to purchase high quality units like air units and artillery. Probably my own mistake. I shouldn't have spent so much money on trying to get as many infantry units as possible. That's definitely hurt my ability to field a more diverse team or army or whatever. Palestinian front continuing to hold firm. We'll be into 2017, or not 2017, we'll be into 17 here in any moment now, once we play through our turn, that is. Approaching the new campaign season. Not that, one thing that campaign season doesn't seem to reflect in pretty much any war games is the natural slowdown of offensives in different seasons, and I'm surprised I rarely see that in any war games these days. It'd be interesting and be an interesting feature to be added to games like this. As far as I can tell, the features don't exist. I could be wrong there. It's certainly possible that the feature is somewhere kind of hidden, but it doesn't seem like it's all that well shown off in games anyway. we continue to kind of launch our targeted attacks against the Russians here in the Eastern Front. Shifting troops around, kind of trying to concentrate my artillery. There's my Zeppelin there, which was badly damaged in an attack on French units. Might be wise to use it against British cities at some point here soon, but haven't quite gotten to the stage where we're able to do that. You know, it's most likely to be destroyed at the current situation with its power being so weak. But meanwhile, with this pause in the action, I just want to bring up our show's official sponsor, Canadian Mist, a whiskey for the gentleman who perhaps isn't ready to splurge on Crown Royal or Maker's Mark. It's a Canadian whiskey designed... Well, Maker's Mark's bourbon, isn't it? Ah, shucks. Anyway, that was just me babbling on about nothing. I have no show sponsor, obviously. Who's gonna sponsor a show of 500 to 1,000 views per video, and a video once a week, once every 3 or 4 days, sometimes every 2 days. But anyway, it'd be fun. Maybe I should do I've been thinking, that was a half-hearted attempt to say the least, but thinking that it would be fun, that is, to do like fake sponsorships and stuff like that. The problem is you get in that situation, and if you say something the person doesn't like, there's potential legal ramifications for that here, as we look to end our turn here in December of 1916 and get into the year of 1917 as we close in on the end of this video here very shortly. What are the Russians going to do? But I am drinking Canadian Mist right now. Again, this was like $13 for a 175, so definitely not unaffordable or anything. Mainly drinking it because of the cost. Although I will say, for a $13 bottle of whiskey, it's not terrible. They have some more expensive brands too, so this is just whatever their generic is. But I saw some flavored stuff that was pretty pricey. I assume it's higher quality because of the price. Generally, alcohol, the higher the price, the better it is, at least up to a certain point. There's definitely a point, in I think, where you hit diminishing returns, and maybe after a certain point there, the returns start coming back. But, generally you're going to, a $30 or $40 750 or 1 liter is going to be a pretty high quality product, whereas something that might only be $10, $11, $12, $15, let alone for a 175, isn't going to be quite up to snuff. I remember I don't reenact or anything regularly, but I've got a friend who does a lot of World War II reenacting, and he had wanted a friend and me to go, to go to a reenactment with him, just to experience it, to do it once and just kind of have the whole experience. And we were drinking out of these old metal canteens. I don't know how you clean a canteen. You're drinking out of this steel container. That's in this case I think it was like a 30 or 40-year-old canteen, military surplus type deal. It's like, I don't know how you clean that. What do you do? So ended up buying I think it was a $6 bottle of Old Thompson whiskey, and ended up cleaning the canteen with that. Didn't fill the canteen with whiskey or anything like that. We drank water out of it, although we certainly drank the whiskey around the fire. Oh no, revolt in Arabia. Oh crap. So someone had warned me in a video not that long ago that we needed to be ready for the revolt that was going to take place in Arabia, and it's happened. Let's see here, an army unit, an armored car unit, and cavalry. So apparently Lawrence of Arabia, he's at it again. Now they all appear to start out of supply, so that's good. I don't know if they'll ever be in supply. I don't know if they take and seize Mecca for a few turns, if they'll end up coming back into supply. But poor planning by me, because I have absolutely no spare troops. I could withdraw out of the Crimea. I mean, I could pull back by rail rapidly, and there's no way the Russians would have the forces to invade Turkey. But I don't want to give up all my gains, so I'm not sure. It's a new challenge, though. Definitely something that we'll have to deal with here. We probably won't deal with it till the next video. But yeah, that reenactment was kind of cool. It was in Benton Harbor, Michigan, and the Navy Reserve actually was participating in that. It allowed the Navy to reserve to get some training on some units that otherwise wouldn't have much training. It was a landing ship, a amphibious landing ship, kind of like the old Higgins boats from World War II, except a big steel tub, probably something that was used in like the 60s or something like that. But this kind of steel tub landing ship probably carries 30, 40 people, and they got the ability to basically get not free training. I mean, they still have to pay for the fuel, but they rarely get Army units that they can train with where they can practice kind of taking them out and landing them onto a beach. So as sort of part of this reenactment, it was a World War II reenactment, which is supposed to kind of I mean, I think it was the Battle of Peleliu is what they were trying to reenact. Obviously not at Peleliu. So they had, a bunch of World War II equipment, some ducks, some not ATVs, but whatever the kind of tracked amphibious vehicle was. But then they also had the more modern, obviously not World War II vintage steel landing craft, and these guys got to practice by landing, ordinary Joe Schmoes on the beaches of Michigan, coming out through Lake Michigan and landing on the beaches of a beach in Michigan near Benton Harbor. It was a pretty cool experience. I don't know how many times you get to say you were on a landing ship, infantry landing ship, and participated in something like that. So it was a cool experience to be part of. And I don't know where I was going with that other than just mentioning that, yeah, cheap alcohol. Generally don't recommend buying a $6 bottle of alcohol. Probably more effective for cleaning your canteen. But anyway, so that appears to be that. Got lost in kind of a tangent there. Kind of a little bit scatterbrained here. We were holding our own on the Western Front. The Allies took Strasbourg, it looks like, and punched a hole in our lines, which we are not. I mean, we could do this. Let's do that. So we'll use that Army unit. Maybe we'll shorten our lines a bit and cut off that French unit in Strasbourg. It's an opportunity to destroy a French unit there, shortening our lines a bit, pulling back. Now these units won't be entrenched, so the Allies could attack them pretty successfully next turn. We'll see. But at the very least, we've got this Frog unit here cut off. And you can see there we used our artillery to try and soften up these French troops, hopefully limiting their utility in a counterattack. I could have bombarded the troops cut off in Strasbourg, but my hope was to weaken that Army unit, since I do have one corps unit that'll be exposed to a counterattack. As it was, the attacks didn't go all that well. The British launched counter battery fire on us, and it wasn't successful at all. But hopefully maybe that'll have instilled some disruption for the French troops there near Strasbourg, so that they'll either have to swap other troops out and instill their own disruption and launch an attack with a less than fully functional unit, or at the very least, if they launch attacks, they'll be less successful because the unit there was under artillery bombardment and infantry assault the turn before. So that's my hope anyway. Basically, attack the enemy before they can attack you. That was a strategy that the Allies actually utilized very successfully in 1918 against the famed German spring drives. By the time they got to the fourth or fifth drive, the Allies were getting intelligence, launching counter battery fire and attacks as the Germans would mount up and prepare for the attack, catching them flat-footed more or less, and seriously undermining the utility of their actual attack. But anyway, folks, I think that's going to just about do it here with this video. This was part 20 of my Commander the Great War series. Definitely intending to fight it out, although I will be honest, I think this war is going to play out pretty close to historical. I don't think I'm going to win, and I think we're going to lose pretty close to the way the Germans lost historically. So I guess we'll see. We're 67 turns in out of a possible 118. Don't feel optimistic that I'll get to the 118, but we'll see what happens. Definitely crazier things have certainly happened. But I do appreciate you tuning in. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like, a comment, a favorite, whatever. All those good things that people always beg for on YouTube and that I kind of jokingly asked for. Although I certainly appreciate it. My channel's grown far beyond anything I ever thought it would. And I just do this for fun, but it's really cool to see. So anyway, guys, that's enough of me rambling. Thank you for tuning in and watching. I hope you enjoyed. Until next time, this is the Historical Gamer, signing out.